I've got this. On a fog-drenched evening in Ashford Heights, a quiet single dad with a hidden past takes on a second shift at an upscale charity gala, only to spot a deadly pattern unfolding in the crowd. One whispered phrase, "I've got this," pulls a federal judge's brilliant daughter and his sharp-eyed teenage son into a web of coded threats, underground tunnels, and a conspiracy that reaches far beyond the glittering ballroom. What starts as one intercepted glass transforms into a heart-pounding journey of courage, sacrifice, and the extraordinary power of integrity that can turn strangers into family. By dawn, a private jet would land, but not for the reasons anyone expected. This is the story of how a father's instinct, a son's genius, and a woman's resilience exposed a dangerous truth, and how one simple promise, "I've got this," became the foundation of something far greater than any of them could have imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fog rolled through Ashford Heights like a living thing, thick and silver, turning the city's evening lights into soft halos that barely pierced the gloom. The Obsidian Hall, a sleek cultural center of glass and polished black stone, rose from the mist like a monument to modern elegance. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors, and a string ensemble played something soft and classical that made the air feel refined. Malvin Carafe adjusted the collar of his black service uniform and checked his watch. 7:30. The charity gala was in full swing, and he had another 4 hours on his shift. He didn't mind. Extra work meant extra money, and extra money meant his son Keller could get the coding software he'd been asking about for months. Malvin moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres to the serving stations. To the guests in their silk gowns and tailored suits, he was invisible, just another face among the catering staff. That was fine with him. Invisibility had served him well for years. First in his previous life, then in this one, the one he'd built after everything changed. He caught sight of his reflection in a polished steel panel and barely recognized himself. 15 years ago, he'd been someone else entirely, someone who moved through dangerous places with purpose and authority. Now he was a single father who worked events and cooked breakfast for his son. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. "Dad," a quiet voice said from behind a service pillar. Malvin turned to find Keller standing there, lanky and 15, with dark hair that perpetually fell across his eyes. The boy wore his usual setup, faded jeans, a hoodie, and a tablet tucked under one arm like a security blanket. "What are you doing here?" Malvin asked, though his tone was more curious than stern. "You said I could wait in the staff lounge and work on my project," Keller replied, holding up the tablet. "But the gala security system is really interesting. Did you know they're running a triple redundant camera network with motion pattern recognition? It's actually pretty sophisticated for a venue this size." Malvin smiled despite himself. His son had inherited his mother's brilliant mind, the kind that saw patterns and connections others missed. After she died, Keller had retreated into logic and code, finding comfort in the predictable world of algorithms. Malvin understood. Everyone grieved differently. "Just stay out of trouble," Malvin said. "And don't hack anything. We need this job." Keller grinned, the expression quick and mischievous. "Define hacking." Before Malvin could respond, a ripple of movement caught his attention. The crowd near the main entrance shifted, making way for someone important. A woman stepped through, and even from across the room, Malvin could tell she carried herself with purpose. She was maybe late 20s, tall and composed, wearing a deep emerald dress that suggested both elegance and strength. Her dark hair was swept back, revealing sharp features and eyes that scanned the room with quick intelligence. Something about her posture, the way she held her shoulders, reminded Malvin of people he used to know, people who'd seen things that changed them. That's Dallas Varanur, Keller said quietly, following his father's gaze. Federal Judge Vorok Varanur's daughter. I read about her. She's a civil rights attorney. Just won a big case against a pharmaceutical company for suppressing safety data. Malvin filed the information away. In his experience, people who won big cases against powerful companies sometimes made powerful enemies. The gala continued around them. Donors mingled with artists and philanthropists, champagne flowed, and the string ensemble shifted to something livelier. Malvin returned to his duties, but some old instinct kept pulling his attention back to Dallas Varanur. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, shaking hands and smiling, but there was tension in her movements, a watchfulness that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable. An hour passed. The evening settled into its rhythm. Then Malvin noticed something that made his blood run cold. A server, someone he didn't recognize, was preparing a specific drink at the bar near the north wall. The man's movements were too precise, too deliberate. He poured amber liquid into a crystal glass, then added a mixer. But before handing it off to the attending server, his hand moved in a way that was almost invisible. A quick flick that deposited something into the drink. Malvin's training snapped into focus. Years of reading body language, of watching for threats in crowds, crystallized into certainty. That wasn't a standard pour. That was contamination. He tracked the suspicious server's eyeline across the room and felt his stomach drop. The drink was being prepared for someone specific, and that someone was moving toward the bar now, laughing at something a colleague had said. Dallas Varanur. Malvin didn't hesitate. He crossed the ballroom floor with purpose, not running but moving with the kind of controlled speed that drew no attention. Keller noticed immediately and followed, tablet in hand. The attending server lifted the tray with the poisoned drink, heading toward Dallas. Malvin intercepted smoothly, stepping into the server's path with a practiced apologetic smile. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low but firm. "Kitchen needs you for a moment." VIP request, something about allergies. The server hesitated, confused. That moment was all Malvin needed. He gently took the tray, balancing it with one hand. "I've got this. I'll handle the delivery." The server nodded, relieved to avoid a potential allergy issue, and hurried toward the kitchen. Malvin carried the tray to a quiet corner near a service exit, Keller trailing close behind. "Dad, what's wrong?" The boy whispered. "That drink," Malvin said quietly, examining the glass without touching it. "Someone tampered with it." Keller's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Positive, but that drink was for her, wasn't it?" "The judge's daughter?" Malvin nodded slowly, his mind already working through possibilities. This wasn't random. This was planned, deliberate, professional. Someone wanted Dallas Varanur hurt, maybe killed, and they'd chosen a crowded gala as the perfect cover. He looked back across the ballroom. Dallas was still talking with guests, unaware that she'd just been targeted. The suspicious server had vanished into the crowd, probably already leaving the venue. "Keller," Malvin said, his voice taking on the tone of command he rarely used anymore. "I need you to do something for me. Pull up the security camera feeds on your tablet." "Can you do that?" "I mean, technically I shouldn't, but yeah, I can route through the maintenance network." "Do it. Find that server, track where he goes. We need to know who he is and who sent him." As Keller's fingers flew across his tablet screen, Malvin made a decision. He couldn't just throw away a potentially poisoned drink and pretend nothing happened. If someone was targeting Dallas Varanur, she needed to know. And she needed to know now. He set the tray down carefully on a service cart and moved back into the ballroom, scanning the crowd for the woman in the emerald dress. When he found her, she was alone for a moment, checking her phone near a tall window that overlooked the foggy city. Malvin approached, his heart steady despite the gravity of what he was about to do. This moment would change everything, he could feel it. But walking away wasn't an option. It never had been. He stopped beside her, close enough to speak quietly, but not so close as to alarm her. "Ms. Varaner," he said, his voice low and even, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Don't react. Don't look around. Just listen to me very carefully. Someone just tried to poison you." Dallas Varaner's hand tightened on her phone, but to her credit, she didn't turn, didn't gasp, didn't give anything away. Her reflection in the dark window showed only the slightest tension in her jaw. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, controlled and sharp. "Who are you?" "Event staff," Malvin replied, maintaining his casual posture as if they were discussing the weather. "My name is Malvin Karaith. I'm former security services, and I just watched someone spike a drink intended for you. The glass is currently on a service cart near the east kitchen entrance. You need to leave this venue now." Her gray eyes flicked to his reflection in the window, assessing him in a single sweep. "If this is some kind of joke or threat, I should tell you that my father is a federal judge, and I have 3 attorneys on speed dial. It's neither," Malvin said calmly. "But we don't have time for verification. The person who contaminated your drink is already gone, which means this was planned and executed by someone who knows how to disappear. That level of professionalism suggests you're in serious danger." Dallas turned slightly, still not fully facing him, her mind clearly working through the implications. "Why should I trust you? For all I know, you could be part of whatever this is. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, because if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't be warning you," Malvin said. "I'd have let you drink what was in that glass." The logic was simple and undeniable. Dallas processed it, then gave the smallest nod. "What do you suggest?" "First, we secure the evidence. Then we get you somewhere safe while we figure out who's behind this." Before she could respond, Keller appeared at his father's elbow, tablet glowing. "Dad, you need to see this." Malvin kept his body between Keller and the crowd, shielding the screen from view. The security footage showed a man in catering uniform leaving through a service exit, pulling off his jacket as he walked. But it was the timestamp that made Malvin's jaw tighten. He disabled the camera feed 30 seconds after he left. Keller said quietly, "Whoever this guy is, he knows how to cover his tracks. And look at this, the uniform he's wearing. It's not from the usual catering company. The logo is slightly different. It's a fake." Dallas leaned in despite herself, her professional instincts overriding caution. "Can you track where he went after leaving the building?" "I can try," Keller said, fingers already moving across the screen. "The city has traffic cameras at most intersections in Ashford Heights. If I can access the municipal network, I might be able to follow his route." "That's illegal access of city infrastructure," Dallas pointed out, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. "So is attempted murder," Keller replied without looking up. Despite the gravity of the situation, Malvin caught the ghost of a smile on Dallas's face. Then it vanished, replaced by cold determination. "If someone wanted to kill me," she said slowly, "it's probably related to my father's recent case. He just handed down a ruling against Helix Dynamics, a military contractor accused of selling defective body armor to overseas allies. Cost them billions and exposed corruption at the highest levels." Malvin felt a chill run through him. Helix Dynamics. He knew that name. Everyone in certain circles knew that name. They had connections everywhere, the kind of money that could make problems disappear, and the kind of ruthlessness that made examples of people who crossed them. "That's bigger than I thought," he said quietly. "Welcome to my world," Dallas replied, her voice carrying an edge of bitter experience. "This isn't the first threat I've received, but it's the first one that's gotten this close." Keller's head snapped up. "Got something." The suspect headed north after leaving the venue, caught on 3 different traffic cameras. But then the feeds go dark, all at the same intersection. Blackwood and 5th Avenue. Someone killed the cameras remotely. That intersection, Dallas said, her face paling slightly. That's 2 blocks from the federal courthouse. From my father's chambers. The implication hung in the air like a lead weight. If the attacker was heading toward the courthouse, this wasn't just about Dallas. This was about sending a message to her father, the judge who dared to rule against a powerful corporation. Malvin made a decision. We need to move now. Keller, can you pull the original security feed showing the contamination? We need proof. Already on it, his son replied, fingers flying. Downloading to an encrypted backup. They won't be able to wipe this. Dallas pulled out her phone. I'm calling my father. No, Malvin said sharply, then softened his tone. Not yet. If they're sophisticated enough to kill traffic cameras and plant someone inside this venue, they might be monitoring your communications. We make any calls, we do it from a secure location. She hesitated, then nodded, trusting his expertise despite knowing him for less than 5 minutes. Then where do we go? Somewhere public but not obvious, Malvin said, his mind sorting through options. Somewhere with exits and crowds, but not connected to you or your father. The Harlow Street Transit Hub, Keller suggested. It's a major station, always crowded, multiple exits, and it has its own security system separate from city infrastructure. Plus there's a police substation inside, Malvin nodded. Good thinking. We'll head there, secure the evidence, and then contact authorities through proper channels. Dallas straightened, her attorney's mind already shifting into crisis management mode. I'll need to inform my firm's security team. And the U.S. Marshal Service, they handle judicial security. We'll do all of that, Malvin assured her. But first we get out of here alive. They moved as a unit toward the service exit, Malvin leading, Keller in the middle monitoring his tablet, and Dallas bringing up the rear. The gala continued around them, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Music played, champagne flowed, and danger lurked unseen. As they reached the service corridor, Malvin paused. Something felt wrong. The hallway was too quiet, too empty. During an event this size, there should be constant movement back here. Staff rushing between kitchen and ballroom. Wait, he whispered, raising a hand. Keller and Dallas froze. Then they heard it, a soft metallic click from somewhere ahead. Not a door. Not footsteps. Something else. Malvin's training kicked in. He recognized that sound. It was the safety being released on a firearm. Back, he hissed. Now, they retreated quickly but quietly, slipping into a side storage room just as a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Through the narrow gap in the door, Malvin watched a man in tactical gear move through the corridor with military precision, scanning corners, checking doorways. This wasn't the server from earlier. This was someone else, someone sent to finish the job. Dallas's breath caught. Keller gripped his tablet so hard his knuckles went white. Malvin placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder, then put a finger to his lips. The armed figure paused directly outside their hiding spot, head tilting as if listening. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then a voice crackled through the man's radio. Sector 3 clear. Target not located. Repeat, target not located. Copy that, came the reply through static. Expand search pattern. She hasn't left the building. The figure moved on, boots barely whispering against the floor. When the sound faded, Malvin exhaled slowly. They had minutes, maybe less, before the search reached their location. There's another way out, Keller whispered, pulling up a blueprint on his tablet. Service elevator at the end of this corridor leads directly to the underground parking garage. But we'd have to pass 2 security checkpoints. Not security, Malvin corrected grimly. Those were hostile operators. Professional ones. Dallas's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. How many? At least 2, possibly more. Malvin looked at her directly. Whatever case your father ruled on, whoever's behind this isn't playing games. They sent a kill team to a public event. That's bold and desperate, or confident, Dallas added. Confident they can get away with it. Malvin checked his watch. 8:45. The gala would run until midnight, giving them cover in the chaos. But it also meant hundreds of innocent people remained in danger if this escalated. Keller, he said quietly, I need you to do something. Access the building's fire alarm system. Can you trigger a partial evacuation without causing a panic? His son's eyes widened. You want me to pull the fire alarm? No, I want you to trigger a controlled alert, something that gets people moving toward exits without stampeding. Can you do it? Keller's fingers moved across his screen. I can route through the environmental controls, trigger a gas leak warning in specific sectors. It'll initiate a calm but mandatory evacuation procedure. Do it, Malvin said. But wait for my signal, he turned to Dallas. When the evacuation starts, we move with the crowd. Stay close, keep your head down. We get to the transit hub, secure the evidence, and then we bring in everyone from the marshals to the FBI if we have to. She met his eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them. An understanding born of shared danger and mutual trust. I've got this, Malvin said, echoing the words that would define everything to come. And somehow, despite the armed men hunting them, despite the conspiracy closing in, Dallas believed him. The storage room smelled of cleaning supplies and cardboard, a small space filled with shelves of linens and maintenance equipment. Through the narrow gap in the door, Malvin watched the corridor with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned to read danger in the smallest details. Keller sat cross-legged on the floor, tablet balanced on his knees, his young face illuminated by the blue glow. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as he worked his way through the buildings. Environmental control system. Dallas stood beside Malvin, her back pressed against the wall, breathing controlled despite the adrenaline he knew must be flooding her system. She'd handled the initial shock with remarkable composure, a sign of someone used to pressure situations. Got it, Keller whispered. I'm in the environmental monitoring system. I can trigger a staged alert that'll start evacuation procedures without causing panic. But Dad, once I do this, building security will lock down certain areas. We'll have maybe 4 minutes before automated systems seal the service exits. Malvin processed this quickly. 4 minutes to cross a building while evading armed hostiles and blending with evacuating guests. Not ideal, but workable. What's our route? He asked. Keller pulled up the building schematic. Main service corridor to the west stairwell, down 2 flights, through the catering prep area, and out through the kitchen loading dock. It connects directly to the street, away from the main entrance where they'll expect us to go. Security cameras? Dallas asked. I can loop them, Keller said. Give us a 30-second ghost window. But I can only do it once. After that, the system will flag the anomaly and alert building security. Malvin nodded. Then we make it count. Trigger the evacuation alert in 30 seconds. Dallas, stay between me and Keller. Don't stop for anything, don't look back. If we get separated, head for the transit hub at Harlow Street. There's a coffee shop on the 3rd level called Meridian Grounds. Wait there. I'm not leaving you, she said firmly. You won't have to, Malvin replied. But we plan for contingencies. Keller's fingers hovered over the screen. Ready when you are. Malvin took a slow breath, his mind slipping into the calm clarity that had carried him through countless dangerous situations. This was different, though. This time his son was with him, and protecting Keller meant more than any mission ever had. Do it, he said. Keller tapped the screen. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then a soft but insistent tone began echoing through the building. accompanied by a calm, automated voice. Attention! A minor environmental irregularity has been detected in Sectors 4 and 5. As a precautionary measure, all guests and staff are asked to proceed to the nearest exit in an orderly fashion. This is not an emergency. Please follow the illuminated pathway markers. The effect was immediate. Through the storage room door, Malvin heard voices rising in the corridor, the shuffle of movement, the controlled confusion of people following instructions without panic. Perfect. Camera loop activating in 3, 2, 1 now, Keller said. Malvin eased the door open. The service corridor had transformed. Staff members were ushering guests toward exits, and the organized chaos provided exactly the cover they needed. He stepped out, Keller and Dallas close behind, and they merged smoothly with a group of catering staff heading toward the west stairwell. They moved quickly but not urgently. Just 3 more people following evacuation procedures. Malvin kept his head down, eyes constantly scanning for threats. Somewhere in this building, armed men were searching for Dallas, and they wouldn't stop just because of a gas leak warning. They reached the stairwell without incident. The concrete shaft echoed with footsteps as people descended in orderly lines. Malvin guided his group down, keeping to the right, maintaining a steady pace. 2 flights down, they emerged into a different world. The catering prep area sprawled before them, all stainless steel and harsh fluorescent lighting. Industrial ovens lined one wall, massive refrigeration units another. The evening shift was in the process of evacuation, but a few stragglers remained, grabbing personal items and securing equipment. "Keep moving," murmured. They threaded through the prep stations, heading toward the rear of the space where the loading dock waited. Almost there. Almost safe. Then Keller grabbed his father's arm. "Dad, camera feed just came back online. And someone's watching. I can see the access signature. They know we're here." As if summoned by the words, a figure appeared at the far end of the prep area. The same tactical operator from earlier, weapon held low but ready. He spotted them instantly, recognition flashing across his face. "Move!" Malvin shouted. They ran. Behind them, the operator raised his weapon, but the presence of lingering staff members complicated his shot. He couldn't fire in a room full of witnesses. Not yet. Malvin grabbed a rolling equipment cart and shoved it hard, sending it careening into the operator's path. The man dodged, but it bought them precious seconds. They burst through the loading dock doors into the cool night air. The dock was a concrete platform overlooking a narrow alley. Delivery trucks were parked in neat rows, and beyond them, the foggy streets of Ashford Heights beckoned. Emergency lights cast everything in shades of red and white. "Which way?" Dallas gasped. "Left," Malvin said. "Stay with me." They jumped down from the platform and ran between parked trucks. Behind them, the loading dock door burst open again. The operator emerged, but he wasn't alone anymore. 2 more figures flanked him, all 3 moving with military precision. Malvin's mind raced through options. They were in the open, outnumbered, and the alley ended at a busy street where civilian traffic moved past. A gunfight here would be catastrophic. Then Keller surprised him. The boy stopped running, spun around, and pulled something from his hoodie pocket. A small drone, no bigger than his hand, with 4 tiny propellers. Where had he been hiding that? "Keller, what are you doing?" Malvin demanded. "Buying time," his son replied, fingers flying over his tablet. The drone lifted into the air with a high-pitched whir, its LED lights blinking erratically as Keller sent it straight toward the pursuing operators. The effect was immediate. The lead operator raised his weapon, tracking the drone. His companions scattered, uncertain if the device was armed or a distraction. In their moment of hesitation, Malvin acted. He pulled Dallas behind a delivery truck, then grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount. The operators were advancing again, but they were bunched together, a tactical mistake. Malvin didn't hesitate. He pulled the pin and aimed. Compressed foam exploded outward in a thick white cloud, engulfing the operators. They stumbled back, visibility zero, weapons temporarily useless. Malvin dropped the extinguisher and ran, scooping Keller up as he moved. The drone? Keller protested. Is not worth your life, Malvin said firmly. They burst from the alley onto a main street. The fog had thickened, turning the evening into a maze of limited visibility and muted sounds. Headlights cut through the murk, and the normal sounds of city traffic provided cover. Transit hub is 6 blocks north, Dallas said. Getting her bearings, we can't go direct, Malvin replied. They'll expect that. We zigzag, use the fog. Stay in public areas. They moved quickly through the streets of Ashford Heights. 3 figures among many, anonymous in the urban landscape. Behind them, somewhere in the fog, their pursuers regrouped. But for now, they had distance and cover. As they walked, Malvin's mind worked through everything that had happened. Professional operators, sophisticated coordination, willingness to act in a public venue. This wasn't just corporate revenge. This was something bigger, darker, more dangerous than a simple retribution against a judge. Beside him, Dallas seemed to be thinking the same thing. My father's ruling, she said quietly. It wasn't just about money. The evidence we presented showed Helix Dynamics knew their armor was defective. They let soldiers and security personnel die rather than admit the flaw. We're talking about criminal negligence, possibly manslaughter. Powerful people facing real consequences, Malvin said. That's when they get desperate. Keller looked up at his father. But why come after her? Why not the judge directly? Because hurting family sends a stronger message, Malvin replied grimly. It's about fear, control, showing that no one is safe if you cross them. Dallas's jaw tightened. They picked the wrong family to threaten. Despite everything, Malvin felt a flicker of admiration for her resolve. She wasn't cowering or falling apart. She was getting angry, which meant she was preparing to fight back. They turned down a side street, the transit hub's lights visible in the distance through the fog. Safety was close. But Malvin knew from experience that the last stretch was always the most dangerous. As they approached a crosswalk, Keller's tablet buzzed. The boy glanced at the screen and his face went pale. Dad, he whispered. The security footage I downloaded from the gala. Someone's trying to remotely wipe it. They're attacking the file through my cloud backup. Malvin stopped. Can you stop them? I can disconnect from the network, but then I can't access any systems. We'd be blind. Do it, Dallas said immediately. That footage is evidence. Without it, this becomes he said, she said. And with Helix Dynamics resources, they'll bury the truth. Keller nodded and quickly severed his connection. The tablet screen dimmed, showing only local files. Done. The footage is safe. But we're offline now. Then we move faster, Malvin said. They crossed the street and entered the transit hub through a side entrance. The massive structure buzzed with life. Commuters moving in rivers of purpose. Announcements echoing from overhead speakers. The smell of coffee and pretzels mixing with the scent of diesel and electricity. Here, in the controlled chaos, they could disappear. Here, they could regroup and plan their next move. But as they stepped onto the main concourse, Malvin spotted something that made his blood run cold. Near the central information kiosk, a man stood scanning the crowd. Different face than the operators from the gala, different clothes, but the same focused intensity, the same professional bearing. They weren't safe yet. Not by a long shot. Malvin pulled Dallas and Keller into the shadow of a pillar, his mind already working on their next move. The game had changed. Their enemies were adaptive, well-funded, and clearly had resources everywhere in the city. But Malvin had resources too. Experience, skill, and most importantly, something worth fighting for. His son's safety, and now, whether he'd planned it or not, the life of a woman who'd become his responsibility the moment he'd said those 3 words. They got this. And he meant it. The Harlow Street Transit Hub thrummed with life. A massive cathedral of steel and glass where thousands of commuters intersected daily. Electronic boards displayed departure times in glowing amber, and the constant echo of footsteps on marble floors created a sound like distant rain. Malvin pressed himself against a support pillar, Keller and Dulles close beside him, all three watching the man near the information kiosk. The watcher stood with his back to a wall, eyes methodically scanning faces in the crowd. Professional stance, hands visible but ready, positioned for optimal sight lines. Former military or law enforcement, Malvin's instincts told him. Possibly both. How many? Dulles whispered. Just one that I can see, Malvin replied. But where there's one, there are usually more. Keller shifted his tablet, screen still dark from being offline. We need network access. I can't reach anyone or check if there are more of them without it, Malvin thought quickly. The transit hub had its own security system, separate from city infrastructure, as Keller had mentioned. That meant dedicated servers, isolated networks, potentially harder to compromise. The police substation, Malvin said. Third level, East Wing. We get there, we're in a controlled environment. They'll have secure communications, and we'd be trapped if someone's watching the entrance, Dulles countered. Her attorney's mind was sharp, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Then we don't use the main entrance, Keller said. Transit hub blueprints show maintenance access on the 2nd level. Connects directly to the substation's back offices. Malvin looked at his son with renewed appreciation. You memorized the blueprints? Keller shrugged. I looked them up while we were walking. Figured it might be useful. It is, Malvin confirmed. Lead the way, but stay in crowded areas. They moved as a unit, weaving through clusters of commuters. The evening rush had thinned but hadn't ended, leaving enough people to provide cover without the crush that would slow them down. Malvin kept his body between the watcher and his companions, using his broader frame to shield them from view. They reached the escalator to the 2nd level without incident. As they rose, Malvin risked a glance back. The watcher was still there, but now he was speaking into a concealed radio, hand cupped near his mouth. Reporting in. Which meant he either hadn't seen them, or he was coordinating with others. That 2nd level was quieter, more service-oriented. Restaurants and shops lined the concourse, but foot traffic was lighter. Keller led them past a coffee shop, a bookstore, and finally to an unmarked door labeled Authorized Personnel Only. Locked, Dulles observed. Keller pulled a small toolkit from his seemingly bottomless hoodie pocket. Not for long. Where did you learn to pick locks? Malvin asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. The boy had taught himself, the same way he'd taught himself coding and electronics. Pure curiosity and stubborn determination. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked. They slipped through into a concrete corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Service access, exactly as Keller had described. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh white, and the air smelled of ozone and dust. This way, Keller said, orienting himself using memory of the blueprints. About 50 meters, then up a flight of stairs. Should bring us out behind the substation's administrative area. They moved quickly through the utilitarian space. Somewhere above them, the transit hub continued its normal rhythm, but down here, everything was stripped to function. Just walls, pipes, and the hum of machinery. Malvin heard it before he saw it, footsteps echoing from somewhere behind them. Heavy, purposeful, moving fast. Someone had followed them into the maintenance area. Run, Malvin said, voice tight with urgency. They sprinted through the corridor. The footsteps behind them accelerated, gaining ground. Ahead, Malvin spotted the stairwell Keller had mentioned, a metal structure ascending into shadow. They hit the stairs at full speed, taking them 2 at a time. Behind them, their pursuer reached the stairwell base and started climbing. Malvin could hear heavy breathing, the sound of someone in excellent shape pushing hard. At the top of the stairs, a door. Keller grabbed the handle and pushed. It didn't move. It's locked from the other side, he gasped. The footsteps were getting closer. Seconds, maybe less. Malvin's mind raced through options, all of them bad. They were trapped in a concrete stairwell with one way out and an armed, hostile closing in. Then Dalise did something unexpected. She removed one of her heels, an elegant pump with a steel reinforced point, and slammed it into the door's card reader. Sparks flew, the electronic lock shorted out, and the magnetic seal released with a soft click. "Law school survival skills," she said with grim satisfaction. They burst through into a brightly lit corridor. Office doors lined both sides, and at the far end, Malvin could see the distinctive blue and white of a police station entrance. Safety was 30 meters away. They ran. Behind them, the stairwell door crashed open. Malvin risked a glance back and saw their pursuer clearly for the first time. Same tactical gear as the operators from the gala, same professional bearing. But this one had made a critical mistake. He'd shown his face. Malvin memorized the features in an instant. Square jaw, close-cropped hair, a scar running through the left eyebrow. Details that could identify him later. They reached the police substation entrance and practically fell through the doors. A young officer at the front desk jumped to his feet, hand instinctively moving toward his service weapon. "We need help," Dalise said, pulling out identification with trembling hands. "I'm Dalise Varaner, daughter of federal judge Vorok Varaner. Someone just tried to kill me, and they're still pursuing us." The officer's eyes widened. He reached for his radio, but before he could speak, Malvin grabbed his arm. "Wait," Malvin said urgently. "They've been tracking us through electronic systems. Radio communication might be compromised. We need a hard line, something they can't intercept." The officer looked uncertain, torn between protocol and the intensity in Malvin's voice. Then a senior officer emerged from a back room, drawn by the commotion. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen it all. "I'm Sergeant Thorne," she said, taking in the scene with quick assessment. "Someone want to tell me what's happening?" Dalise straightened, finding her courtroom composure despite the disheveled hair and missing shoe. "My name is Dalise Varaner. My father is federal judge Vorok Varaner. Approximately 1 hour ago, someone attempted to poison me at a charity gala at the Obsidian Hall. When that failed, they sent armed operatives to finish the job. This man," she gestured to Malvin, "saved my life and has been protecting me since." "Sergeant." Thorne's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. "Armed operatives?" "Here in the transit hub. At least one followed us into the maintenance corridors," Malvin confirmed. "But there are more. They're coordinated, well-funded, and they've demonstrated ability to compromise electronic systems." The sergeant pulled a keyring from her belt. "Conference room now. It's shielded and secure. No windows, reinforced door." She looked at the young officer. "Patterson, I want every exit from this substation watched. No one comes in or out without my authorization. And get me Detective Voran from Major Crimes on a landline." They were ushered into a windowless room with a heavy door and concrete walls. A conference table dominated the space, surrounded by chairs that had seen better days. Sergeant Thorne closed the door and engaged multiple locks. "You're safe here," she said. "Now start from the beginning. For the next 10 minutes, they recounted everything. The poisoned drink, the operators at the gala, the chase through the city, the pursuit into the transit hub." Keller pulled out his tablet and, using the secure network connection the sergeant provided, displayed the security footage he'd saved. The video was damning. Crystal clear images of the fake server preparing the drink, the subtle motion of contamination, the intentional delivery route toward Dallas. Then footage of tactical operators moving through the Obsidian Hall with military precision. "Sergeant." Thorne's face grew darker with each revelation. "This is bigger than attempted murder," she said quietly. "This is conspiracy. Possibly domestic terrorism if they're targeting federal officials' families. It's connected to my father's recent ruling, Dulles explained. Helix Dynamics, the military contractor. They lost billions and faced criminal exposure. My father's decision was handed down 3 days ago. 3 days, Malvin repeated. And they've already organized this level of operation? That suggests the plan was in place before the ruling. They were prepared to act regardless of the outcome. The implication settled over the room like a heavy blanket. This wasn't reactive violence. This was premeditated, calculated, and far-reaching. Keller, who'd been quietly working on his tablet, suddenly looked up. I found something. The camera system at the gala, the one that was compromised. I traced the remote access signature. It routes through 3 proxy servers, but the origin point is interesting. He turned the screen around. On it, a digital map showed connection routes highlighted in red, all converging on a single location in Ashford Heights. That's the Apex Tower, Dulles said, recognizing the building. High-end corporate offices. But there are at least 50 companies in that building. How do we know which one? Because, Keller said, fingers flying across the keyboard, I cross-referenced the access times with building security logs from their public-facing visitor system. And look what I found. He pulled up a new screen showing logged entries. Most were mundane. Deliveries, appointments, maintenance crews. But one entry stood out, logged at exactly the time the camera system was first compromised. Obsidian Event Services, Malvin read. Never heard of them. Because they don't exist, Keller said triumphantly. I ran the business registration. It's a shell company, created 2 weeks ago, dissolved 3 days after my father's ruling. But here's the interesting part. He pulled up another document. The business registration lists a managing partner, someone named Sylvan Maurice, Dulles gasped. That's the CEO of Helix Dynamics Security Division. I saw his name in the trial documents. He's former intelligence services, connected to everyone who matters in the defense industry. And now he's orchestrating hits on federal judges' families, Sergeant Thorne said grimly. She picked up the landline phone. I'm calling this up the chain. FBI, U.S. Marshals, maybe even Homeland Security. This has gone way beyond local jurisdiction. As she made calls, Malvin sat back in his chair, mind working through patterns. Everything fit now. The professional operators, the sophisticated planning, the electronic warfare capabilities. This was an intelligence operation, conducted with the resources of a major defense contractor and the ruthlessness of people who had everything to lose. Dulles moved to sit beside him. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. You didn't have to get involved, but you did. You saved my life. Malvin met her eyes. I couldn't stand by and watch someone die. Especially not when I could do something about it. Your son, she continued, glancing at Keller, who was absorbed in his tablet again. He's remarkable. The way he thinks, the skills he has. He's going to do extraordinary things. He already has, Malvin said, pride evident in his voice. His mother would be so proud. She passed away? Malvin nodded. 3 years ago, cancer. It was quick, which was a mercy in some ways. But it left a hole that never quite fills. Dulles placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of understanding and shared grief. My mother died when I was young. Different circumstances, but the loss is similar. You learn to carry it, but it never really leaves. Before Malvin could respond, Sergeant Thorne hung up the phone, her expression grave. FBI is sending a team. ETA, 20 minutes. U.S. Marshals are securing Judge Verriner at the federal courthouse. And Homeland Security wants everything we have on Helix Dynamics involvement. What about Sylvan Maurice? Malvin asked. They're working on a warrant, but he's already lawyered up. Claim he has nothing to do with any of this. That his name on that shell company registration is identity theft. She shook her head in disgust. Money talks, and he's got plenty of it. Keller looked up from his tablet, his young face troubled. There's something else. I've been monitoring news feeds since we got here. The Obsidian Hall evacuation? It's being reported as a false alarm. No mention of any attack or armed operatives. And the traffic camera footage from the streets around the venue has been wiped clean. They're scrubbing evidence, Dallas said, anger rising in her voice. Covering their tracks. Not all of it, Keller said, holding up his tablet. I still have the original security footage from the gala. And I made multiple encrypted backups before taking the system offline. They can't erase what they can't find. Malvin felt a surge of pride for his son. The boy had thought ahead, planned for contingencies, understood that evidence would be the key to everything. In that moment, he saw not just the teenager struggling with grief and growing up too fast, but the man Keller was becoming. Then that footage becomes our priority, Sergeant Thorne said. Once BI arrives, we hand it over to them directly. No digital transfer, no network vulnerability. Physical drive, in-person delivery. Malvin stood and walked to the room's single door, pressing his ear against the heavy steel. Outside, he could hear muffled voices, the normal sounds of a police station. But underneath, something else. A tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. They're going to try again, he said quietly. Maybe not tonight, but soon. As long as Dallas is alive and that footage exists, they're exposed. Dallas joined him. Then we make sure that footage gets to the right people. We expose them before they can strike again. Easier said than done, Malvin replied. Helix Dynamics has resources we can't match. Money, connections, political influence. But they made one critical mistake, Dallas said, her voice carrying the steel of someone who'd spent years fighting in courtrooms. They underestimated us. They thought intimidation would work. They thought fear would silence truth. They were wrong. Malvin looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone extraordinary. Not just in the obvious ways, the intelligence and courage and beauty, but in the fundamental strength that let her stand firm when the world pushed back. In that moment, something shifted between them. An understanding that went beyond circumstance, a connection forged in danger, but rooted in something deeper. We end this, Malvin said. Together, Dallas agreed, and in a conference room deep inside a transit hub police station, as federal agents raced toward them and enemies plotted in shadow, a promise was made. Not just to survive, but to fight. To stand against corruption and violence with nothing but truth and courage. Outside, the fog continued to blanket Ashford Heights. But inside, clarity burned bright. The 20 minutes waiting for FBI arrival felt like hours. Malvin paced the conference room with controlled energy, every instinct screaming that sitting still was dangerous. Keller remained hunched over his tablet, fingers dancing across keys as he reinforced the encryption on their evidence. Dallas had borrowed Sergeant Thorne's phone to make calls, her voice low and urgent as she coordinated with her law firm security team. Sergeant Thorne stood by the door, radio in hand, coordinating with her officers. Everything seemed secure. The substation was locked down, armed officers at every exit, and federal agents were minutes away. But Malvin couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then Keller's head snapped up. "Dad, we have a problem." Malvin crossed to him in 2 strides. "What?" "I've been monitoring the substation security feeds through their network. Someone just accessed the building ventilation system from an external terminal." Keller's fingers flew across the screen, pulling up logs. "They're not trying to cut power or compromise communications. They're doing something else." Sergeant Thorne joined them, looking over Keller's shoulder. "What are they accessing?" "Environmental controls," Keller said, his voice tight with worry. "Specifically, the air handling system for this section of the building." The implication hit Malvin like a physical blow. Gas, they're going to flood this room with something. Not just this room. Keller corrected, pulling up a schematic. The entire administrative wing. They'll knock out everyone in this section, then extract or eliminate us in the confusion. Sergeant Thorne grabbed her radio. All units, we have a potential chemical attack on the admin wing. Evacuate immediately. I repeat, evacuate. The lights flickered once, then died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. And through the ventilation grate above them, Malvin heard a soft hissing sound. Out now! He shouted. Sergeant Thorne threw open the conference room door. The corridor beyond was already hazy with a pale gas seeping from vents. Officers were stumbling, coughing, trying to reach exits. The gas was fast-acting, some kind of knockout agent that didn't kill but incapacitated within seconds. Malvin grabbed Keller, pulling his shirt up over the boy's mouth and nose. Dallas did the same with her jacket. Sergeant Thorne was already moving, years of training overriding panic as she helped officers toward the nearest exit. The evidence. Dallas gasped through the makeshift mask. We can't lose the footage. Keller clutched his tablet to his chest. I've got it. They ran through the corridor, eyes burning, lungs fighting against the desire to inhale deeply. The gas was thicker now, visibility dropping to mere feet. Malvin kept one hand on Keller's shoulder, the other reaching back to ensure Dallas stayed close. Officers were down, sprawled across the floor in various states of consciousness. Sergeant Thorne stopped to help one, and Malvin knew they couldn't wait. Seconds counted now. Emergency stairs, he shouted, pointing to a doorway marked in glowing red letters. Go! They burst through into a concrete stairwell. The air was clearer here, the gas not yet penetrated this far. But Malvin could hear footsteps echoing from below, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Up, he decided. They'll expect us to go down and out. We go up and across, find another way out. We go up and across, find another way out. They climbed, legs burning, lungs gasping for clean air. The stairwell seemed endless, each landing identical to the last. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder. Their pursuers were in the stairwell now, moving fast. Third floor. Fourth floor. Malvin's military training pushed him past exhaustion. Beside him, Keller kept pace with the determination of youth, while Dallas, despite the elegant dress and missing shoe, matched them stride for stride. Fifth floor. The door here was marked Transit Operations Center. Malvin didn't hesitate. He grabbed the handle and pushed through. They emerged into a vast control room filled with monitors displaying every corner of the transit hub. Dozens of screens showed platforms, corridors, trains arriving and departing. But the room was empty, evacuated due to the gas attack below. Lock it, Malvin ordered. Keller found the electronic lock panel and quickly worked his magic. Within seconds, the door mechanism engaged with a solid thunk. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might buy them minutes. Malvin scanned the room, looking for options. The control center was designed as a secure facility, which meant limited access points. One main entrance now locked. Windows overlooking the transit hub's main concourse. And a maintenance catwalk that connected to the adjacent building. There, he said, pointing to the catwalk. That's our way out. Dallas looked at the narrow metal walkway suspended 50 feet above the concourse floor. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Behind them, heavy impacts began slamming against the locked door. Their pursuers weren't bothering with subtlety anymore. They were going to break through by force. Keller was already at the catwalk entrance, working on another lock. This one's mechanical. Dad, I need something to pry with. Malvin grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and used it as a lever, jamming it into the lock mechanism and pulling hard. Metal groaned, then snapped. The catwalk door swung open, revealing the narrow passage beyond. Go, Malvin said. Don't look down. Keep your eyes forward. Keller went first, his lighter weight making the catwalk sway gently. Dallas followed, gripping the handrails with white-knuckled determination. Malvin brought up the rear, constantly glancing back at the control room door that was beginning to buckle under repeated impacts. They were halfway across when the door finally gave way. Men in tactical gear poured through, weapons raised. But the catwalk's narrow width and their elevation provided temporary advantage. The operators couldn't get a clear shot without risk of hitting each other. "Move," Malvin urged. They reached the far side just as the first operator stepped onto the catwalk. The structure groaned under the additional weight, designed for maintenance personnel, not armed pursuit teams. Malvin pulled Dallas and Keller through into the adjacent building, a commercial office complex that connected to the transit hub via Skybridge. He slammed the door and looked for a way to secure it. There was nothing. Just a simple handle with no lock. "Keller, can you jam it electronically?" His son shook his head. "No control panel, it's purely mechanical." Malvin looked around desperately. They were in a service corridor, maintenance supplies stored in metal cages along the walls. His eyes landed on a thick chain and padlock used to secure equipment. "Help me," he said, grabbing the chain. Together they wrapped it around the door handle and a nearby pipe, securing it with the padlock. It wouldn't hold long, but maybe long enough. "This building has a separate exit system," Dallas said, getting her bearings. "If we can reach the main lobby, we can get to street level." "They'll have people covering the exits," Malvin countered. "We need a different approach." Keller was already on his tablet again, having reconnected to the building's network. "I can trigger a fire alarm in a different section, create a diversion. Everyone will head for emergency exits, including any watchers they've positioned." "Do it," Malvin said. "But we need to move before they breach that door." As if summoned by his words, heavy impacts began slamming against the chained door. The operators were through the catwalk and now working to break through to them. Keller triggered the alarm. Immediately, a piercing siren filled the building, and recorded evacuation instructions began playing over speakers. Doors opened along the corridor as office workers emerged, confused but compliant, heading for emergency stairs. "We blend with the crowd," Malvin said. "Remove anything that makes us stand out." He stripped off his catering jacket, now torn and dirty. Dallas removed her remaining heel, preferring bare feet to limping. Keller tucked his tablet under his hoodie. They joined the flow of evacuating workers, just 3 more people following emergency procedures. The crowd moved down emergency stairs, a controlled descent that felt agonizingly slow. Behind them, Malvin could hear the chained door finally giving way, the operators pushing through. But in the press of evacuating workers, pinpointing 3 specific people would be difficult. They reached the lobby, a soaring space of marble and glass. The crowd streamed toward exits, and outside, Malvin could see emergency vehicles responding to the fire alarm. No actual fire, but the response was real enough to provide cover. "Stay close," he murmured, guiding them toward a side exit away from the main crowd. They emerged onto a side street, fog still thick, evening fully settled into night. The cool air hit them like a blessing after the chaos inside. But they weren't safe yet. Not even close. "We need somewhere secure," Dallas said. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Malvin thought quickly. Hotels would have cameras. Safe houses required time to arrange. Friends or family would be watched. They needed something off the grid. Unexpected. Then it came to him. "The old railway maintenance depot," he said. "East side of the city, near the industrial district. It's been abandoned for years, but I know a way in. No power, no security systems, nothing they can trace." "How do you know about it?" Dallas asked. "When I first moved to Ashford Heights, I didn't have much money. I stayed there for a few weeks before finding proper housing. It's not comfortable, but it's invisible," Keller nodded. "And I can use a mobile hotspot to access networks without connecting to any building systems. We'd be dark, but not blind. How do we get there without being tracked? Dallas asked. Malvin looked at the street. We walk, no cars, no transit. We move through areas without cameras, stay in shadows. It'll take an hour, maybe more. But we can make it. They set off into the foggy night, 3 figures disappearing into Ashford Heights' urban maze. Behind them, operators would be searching, coordinating, calling in resources. But for now, in this moment, they had the one advantage that mattered. They were ghosts in the city's vast landscape. As they walked, Malvin found himself acutely aware of Dallas beside him. Despite everything, despite the danger and exhaustion, she kept moving with quiet determination. And Keller, his remarkable son, matched them step for step, whatever came next. Whatever final confrontation awaited in the hours ahead, they would face it together. 3 strangers bound by circumstance, transformed by crisis into something more. A team. An alliance. Maybe, in time, something even deeper. But first, they had to survive the night. The abandoned railway maintenance depot crouched in the industrial district like a forgotten monument to another era. Rust streaked its corrugated walls, and broken windows stared out like hollow eyes. But to Malvin, it represented safety, a place so forgotten that even sophisticated surveillance would overlook it. They entered through a side access panel Malvin had discovered years ago, stepping into darkness that smelled of motor oil and decay. Keller activated his tablet's flashlight function, casting a pale glow across the cavernous interior. Old train equipment sat in silent rows, ghosts of machinery that once kept the city moving. Home sweet home, Malvin said with dry humor, guiding them to a corner office that still had intact walls and a door that closed. Dallas looked around the dusty space, then surprised them both by laughing. Not hysterical laughter, but genuine amusement at the absurdity of their situation. This morning I was preparing for a charity gala. Now I'm hiding in an abandoned depot with a single dad and his genius son. Life is strange. Malvin found some old maintenance blankets in a storage locker, shaking off years of dust. Strange doesn't begin to cover it. He handed one to Dallas, another to Keller. Best I can offer. They settled onto the floor, exhaustion finally catching up. Keller immediately connected his tablet to a mobile hotspot, creating a secure network bubble. Within minutes, he was monitoring news feeds and checking for any mention of the evening's events. Nothing yet, he reported. The gala incident is still being reported as a false alarm. The transit hub gas attack is being called a ventilation malfunction. They're controlling the narrative. Dallas wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. That's Helix Dynamics. They don't just have money, they have media connections. They can shape what people believe, but they can't shape facts, Malvin said. We have evidence. Real, documented proof of what happened. Evidence that means nothing if we're dead. Dallas countered, then softened. Sorry, I'm tired, and fear makes me cynical. Malvin studied her in the dim light. Despite the torn dress, the dirt smudged across her face, the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. She remained composed, strong. You're handling this better than most people would, he said. Than most people would, he said. My father raised me to stay calm under pressure. Being a judge's daughter meant living with threats, knowing that every decision he made created enemies. She paused. But knowing it intellectually and experiencing it personally are very different things. Keller looked up from his tablet. Your father, is he safe? The marshals have him secured at the courthouse. He wanted to come to me, but I told him to stay where he was protected. She smiled sadly. Stubborn man argued for 10 minutes before agreeing. Sounds familiar, Keller said. Glancing at his father, Malvin felt the weight of that look. He knew his son was thinking about the choices that had brought them here. The decision to intervene when walking away would have been safer. I'm sorry, Keller. I never meant to put you in danger. You didn't put me in danger, Dad. You did what was right. What Mom would have done. The boy's voice was steady, mature beyond his years. She always said the right choice isn't always the safe choice. The mention of Keller's mother created a moment of silence. Malvin felt the familiar ache, the loss that time softened but never erased. He'd loved her with everything he had, and when cancer took her, it had taken a piece of him too. Dallas seemed to sense the shift in mood. "Tell me about her, if you're willing." Malvin hesitated, then found himself speaking. Her name was Elena. She was a systems engineer, brilliant with technology. That's where Keller gets it. She could look at code and see poetry, see patterns no one else noticed. He smiled at the memory. "We met during my last deployment. She was contracting for communications infrastructure. One conversation and I was lost." "She sounds extraordinary," Dallas said softly. "She was. And she would have liked you. The courage, the integrity. She valued those things above everything else." Keller added quietly, "She used to say that being brave isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing what's right anyway." Dallas met Malvin's eyes, and something passed between them. An understanding of shared loss, of carrying grief while still moving forward, of finding strength in the midst of fear. "Your father," Malvin asked, "what's he like?" "Demanding. Principled to a fault. He believes the law exists to protect people, especially those who can't protect themselves." She smiled. "Growing up, I wanted to rebel, be anything but a lawyer. But watching him fight for justice, seeing him stand against powerful people who thought they were above consequences, I realized that was the fight worth having." They talked through the early morning hours, voices low, sharing pieces of themselves in that forgotten space. Keller dozed eventually, his tablet still glowing beside him. But Malvin and Dallas remained awake, drawn into conversation that ranged from profound to mundane. "After this is over," Dallas said, "assuming we survive, what will you do?" Malvin considered. "Same as always, I suppose. Cook breakfast for Keller, work my shifts, live quietly. You could do more than that. With your skills, your experience, I had my time doing more. Now I just want to be there for my son. To give him the stable life his mother and I always wanted for him." Dallas nodded slowly. "I understand. But sometimes life has other plans. Sometimes ordinary people get pulled into extraordinary situations, and they discover they're capable of more than they imagined. Is that what happened to you tonight?" Malvin asked. "Discovering you're capable of more?" "No," she said, meeting his gaze. "Tonight I discovered I don't have to face the extraordinary alone. That's a different kind of strength. In the cold depot, surrounded by echoes of a forgotten past, something new was being built. Trust forged in danger, connection deepened by shared trial. The foundation of something that might, if they survived, become significant. Outside, dawn was still hours away. But inside that dusty office, a different kind of light was growing. The first pale light of dawn filtered through broken windows, painting the depot in shades of gray and gold. Malvin woke to find Keller already up, hunched over his tablet with the intense focus of someone on the edge of a breakthrough. Dallas slept fitfully in the corner, the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. "Find something?" Malvin asked quietly, stretching muscles stiff from sleeping on concrete. Keller nodded, excitement barely contained. "I've been tracking the shell company registrations linked to Helix Dynamics. Obsidian Event Services wasn't the only one. There are 6 others, all created within the same 2-week period, all dissolved within days of Judge Varaner's ruling. Contingency plans," Malvin said, understanding immediately. "They had multiple operations ready, depending on how the ruling went." "Exactly. But here's what's interesting. One of them, Meridian Security Solutions, is still active. And according to financial records I may have access through less than legal means, it received a massive fund transfer last night. Right around the time we escaped the transit hub." Malvin felt ice forming in his stomach. "They're not done, not even close." Dad, this isn't just about revenge anymore. I think they're planning something bigger. The attack on Dallas was meant to send a message, but it's also a distraction. From what? Before Keller could answer, Dallas stirred, blinking awake. She sat up, wincing at the stiffness, and pushed hair from her face. Please tell me you have good news. We have news, Keller said. Whether it's good depends on your perspective. He explained what he'd found. As he spoke, Dallas's expression shifted from tired to alert to deeply concerned. Meridian Security Solutions. That name was in the trial documents. They're the subsidiary that handles Helix Dynamics' private contracting work. If they're still active and receiving funds, it means operations are ongoing. What kind of operations? Malvin asked. The classified kind. The sort that don't appear in public records. She stood, pacing the small office. During the trial, we uncovered evidence that Helix was running unauthorized security operations overseas. Nothing we could prove definitively, but enough to suggest they were operating outside legal boundaries. Keller pulled up more data. I'm seeing encrypted communication traffic between Meridian and multiple offshore accounts. The volume increased dramatically after the ruling. It's like they're coordinating something big. Malvin's military instincts flared. They're moving assets, probably personnel too. Getting people and resources out before investigators can freeze them. Or moving them into position, Dallas said grimly. My father's ruling didn't just cost them money. It opened them up to criminal prosecution. Key executives could face prison. They have motive to do something desperate. Like what? Keller asked. Dallas met Malvin's eyes. Like eliminating witnesses. Not just me, but anyone who testified against them. The engineers who revealed the defective armor, the military personnel who documented the failures, the accountants who exposed the fraud. The implications settled over them like a shroud. This wasn't one assassination attempt. This was a coordinated effort to erase evidence, silence voices, and escape consequences. We need to warn them, Malvin said immediately. Everyone who's at risk. With what resources? Dallas countered. We're 3 people hiding in an abandoned building. Helix has unlimited funds, political connections, and no moral boundaries. We have the truth, Keller said firmly. And we have evidence they can't erase. Malvin looked at his son, pride swelling. The boy had his mother's courage, her unwavering belief that right would prevail if people were brave enough to fight for it. Then we use it. We expose everything, all at once, so overwhelming they can't suppress it. How? Dallas asked. Keller's fingers were already flying across his tablet. I release everything to multiple sources simultaneously. Major news networks, independent journalists, federal investigators, even international media. Create a flood of information they can't contain. That's dangerous, Malvin warned. The moment you do that, they'll know exactly where to find us. Then we do it from somewhere public, Dallas said, her lawyer's mind engaging with the strategy. Somewhere with witnesses and cameras. They can't act openly if the whole world is watching. Where? Malvin asked. The federal courthouse, Dallas said. It's Saturday morning, but there's a memorial service being held for a retired judge. My father will be there, along with dozens of federal officials, media covering the event, and heavy security. If we arrive during the service, make a public statement, and release the evidence, they can't stop us without exposing themselves. Keller checked the time. The service starts in 3 hours. That gives us time to prepare the data dump and plan our approach. Malvin considered the risks. Walking into a public event meant exposing themselves, becoming visible targets. But it also meant protection through transparency. Helix couldn't act against them if hundreds of witnesses were watching. We do it, he decided. But we do it smart. Keller, you prepare the evidence release. Multiple redundancies, multiple platforms, impossible to stop once it starts. Dallas, you prepare a statement, something concise and devastating. and I'll plan our entry and exit routes. Make sure we can get in and out safely." They spent the next hour in focused preparation. Keller built a digital dead man switch, a system that would automatically release all evidence if he didn't check in at regular intervals. Dalice drafted a statement that laid out the conspiracy in clear, undeniable terms. And Malvin studied maps of the courthouse, identifying routes and contingencies. As they worked, a strange calm settled over the depot. For the first time since the gala, they weren't running. They were planning, taking control, moving from reactive to proactive. It felt empowering. "My father always said," Dalice spoke into the quiet, "that the moment you stop being afraid is the moment you become dangerous to those who rely on fear." "Sounds like a wise man," Malvin replied. "He is. And he's going to be furious when I show up at that memorial service after he specifically told me to stay hidden." Malvin smiled. "Parents and children, eternal conflict." "Speaking of which," Keller interjected, "you do realize that when this is over, you're going to have to explain to school administrators why I missed 3 days of classes." "I'll write you a note," Malvin deadpanned. "Dear teacher," Keller was busy exposing corporate corruption and evading assassins. "Please excuse his absence." They laughed, the sound strange but welcome in the dusty space. For a moment, the weight lifted. For a moment, they were just 3 people sharing a joke instead of 3 people fighting for survival. But the moment couldn't last. Reality pressed back in, reminding them of what lay ahead. In 3 hours, they would step into the light, make their stand, and face whatever consequences followed. "Whatever happens," Malvin said, looking at both of them, "I want you to know something. Last night I said I've got this. And I meant it. But the truth is, we've got this. All of us together." Dalice reached out and took his hand. Keller placed his over both of theirs. 3 hands joined, 3 lives intertwined by circumstance and choice. Outside, Ashford Heights was waking to a new day. Inside the depot, 3 people prepared to change everything. They left the depot as the city stirred to life. Saturday morning in Ashford Heights meant lighter traffic, quieter streets, a weekend rhythm that felt deceptively peaceful. Malvin led them through back alleys and side streets, avoiding main thoroughfares where cameras might track their movement. They looked disheveled, but not suspicious. Just 3 people who'd had a rough night. The federal courthouse rose before them, a massive structure of granite and glass that spoke of permanence and power. News vans clustered near the entrance, and well-dressed mourners streamed up the marble steps. The memorial service for Judge Randolph Westmore, who'd served with distinction for 40 years, had drawn the city's legal elite. There, Dalice pointed to a side entrance used by court personnel. "I have access credentials. We can enter through the staff entrance. Avoid the main security checkpoint." They approached carefully. Malvin's instincts screamed danger, but everything appeared normal. Too normal, perhaps. As they reached the door, Dalice swiped her credentials. The light turned green, and they stepped inside. The corridor was empty, lit by fluorescent lights that hummed softly. Their footsteps echoed on polished floors. Ahead, they could hear the distant murmur of voices from the main hall where the service was taking place. Almost there, Dalice whispered. Then Keller grabbed his father's arm. "Dad, wait. Something's wrong with the network." "What do you mean?" Malvin asked, instantly alert. "The courthouse Wi-Fi, it's broadcasting, but it's not the normal system. The security protocols are different, more sophisticated. This isn't the federal network." His fingers flew across his tablet. "Someone's created a duplicate system, a trap network. Anyone who connects gets tracked." Malvin's blood ran cold. "They knew we'd come here." Before anyone could respond, figures emerged from doorways ahead and behind. 6 men in dark suits, professionals, moving with coordinated precision. They weren't drawing weapons, not yet, but the threat was implicit. A 7th figure stepped forward. Older, distinguished, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Malvin recognized him from news coverage. Sylvain Maurice, CEO of Helix Dynamics Security Division. Ms. Varaner, he said, voice smooth as silk over steel. How predictable. I told my associates you'd attempt something dramatic at your father's event. The need to be seen, to make a public statement, it's a weakness. Dulles straightened, finding her courtroom voice. You're making a mistake. There are witnesses, cameras, federal agents everywhere in this building. Are there? Sylvain smiled coldly. This wing is undergoing security upgrades. Cameras offline, agents reassigned. It's amazing what proper permits and political connections can accomplish. We have perhaps 15 minutes before anyone notices. More than enough time. Malvin positioned himself between the threat and Dulles, his mind racing through options. 6 hostiles, possibly armed, in a contained space. 1 exit behind them, 1 ahead, both blocked. Keller clutching his tablet with their evidence. Dulles unarmed and exhausted. What do you want? Malvin asked, buying time. Simple. The tablet, the evidence, and assurance that this unfortunate incident ends here. No more investigations, no more allegations. Ms. Varaner disappears, a tragic victim of her own paranoia. The veteran and his son, overcome by stress, made poor choices. Everyone goes away quietly. You mean everyone dies quietly, Dulles said. Sylvain shrugged. Semantics. The result is the same. Helix Dynamics continues its important work, and no one remembers this unpleasantness. Keller whispered urgently, Dad, I can trigger the evidence release right now. Once it's out, killing us accomplishes nothing. But Sylvain heard him. The boy's clever, but not clever enough. You see, we've been monitoring his digital footprint since yesterday. Every account he planned to use, every platform, every contact, we've compromised them all. The moment he hits send, we intercept and erase. The evidence vanishes, and you have nothing. Malvin saw the trap clearly now. They'd been herded here, led to believe they had a winning move, only to discover the game was rigged from the start. Helix hadn't just prepared contingencies. They'd predicted every response. There's no way out, Sylvain continued. No clever escape, no last-minute rescue. You're beaten. Accept it with dignity. Malvin felt Dulles tense beside him, felt Keller's fear radiating like heat. His son, his responsibility, was in mortal danger because of choices Malvin had made. The weight of that crushed down like physical pressure. But then Dulles did something unexpected. She laughed. You're right, she said, stepping forward despite Malvin's attempt to hold her back. We can't win. You've thought of everything, covered every angle. Except one. Sylvain's expression flickered with uncertainty. What? You assumed we'd follow predictable patterns. That we'd use normal channels, standard methods. But you forgot something important. She pulled out her phone. Not a smartphone, but an old-style flip phone, the kind that couldn't be remotely accessed or traced. My father's generation believed in backup plans. He gave me this years ago, a direct line to his personal network, one that exists outside digital infrastructure. She flipped it open and dialed from memory. When someone answered, she spoke clearly. This is Dulles Varaner. Authorization code Sentinel-7. I'm in the east wing of the federal courthouse with evidence of a conspiracy to commit murder. Send everyone. Sylvain lunged forward, but Malvin was faster. He intercepted, years of combat training flowing into action. They collided hard, and suddenly the corridor erupted into chaos. The 6 operatives moved in, but Malvin had position and desperation on his side. He fought with the controlled fury of a father protecting his child, every move precise, every strike calculated. He couldn't win against 6, but he could slow them, give time for help to arrive. Dulles grabbed Keller, pulling him toward the nearest door. Run! They burst through into a stairwell. Behind them, Malvin was holding the corridor, a one-man barrier between threat and escape. But he couldn't hold forever. Keller's hands shook as he worked his tablet. I'm uploading everything to that analog line, using the old network infrastructure. It's slower, but they can't intercept what they don't know exists. Progress bars crept across his screen. 60%. 70%. In the corridor, Malvin's strength was fading. He'd disabled 2 operatives, but the others were overwhelming him through sheer numbers. A blow caught his ribs, another his jaw. He tasted blood but stayed standing. Come on, Keller urged his tablet. 80%. 90%. Sylven single quotes S voice cut through the chaos. Enough. Stand down or the boy's father dies right here. Malvin found himself on his knees, an operative's arm around his throat, weapon pressed to his temple. Through blurred vision, he saw Keller frozen in the stairwell doorway, tablet in hand. One button press away from releasing everything. Your choice, boy, Sylven said. His life or your evidence. Time seemed to stop. Malvin met his son's eyes across the distance. In that moment, he saw every memory, every moment they'd shared. Teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, sitting beside hospital beds when his mother was dying. A lifetime of love compressed into a single look, and he saw his son's decision forming. Keller. No, Malvin tried to say, but the arm around his throat cut off his voice. Keller's finger hovered over the tablet. Then he pressed send. Upload complete, he said, voice breaking. It's over. Everyone knows everything now. Sylven's face twisted in rage. The operative's grip tightened. Then, like divine intervention, doors burst open at both ends of the corridor. Federal agents poured in, weapons drawn, voices commanding. The cavalry, summoned by Delice's call, had arrived. The operatives released Malvin immediately, hands raised. Sylven stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed plan collapse in real time. And in the stairwell, Keller still held his tablet, tears streaming down his face. Having made the choice no child should have to make, Dalice rushed to Malvin, helping him stand. He stumbled toward his son, pulling Keller into an embrace. I had to, Keller sobbed. I had to save you. I know, Malvin whispered, holding his son tight. You were so brave. So impossibly brave. Around them, agents secured the scene. Sylven was being read his rights. The operatives were being cuffed. And somewhere in the digital ether, evidence was spreading, impossible to contain, exposing everything. They'd won. But the cost had nearly been everything. The aftermath unfolded in controlled chaos. Federal agents secured the corridor while paramedics checked Malvin's injuries. Nothing serious, just bruises and a split lip that would heal. But the real damage wasn't physical. Keller sat on a bench in the courthouse lobby, shock settling over him like a heavy blanket. He'd uploaded everything, exposed a criminal conspiracy, potentially saved countless lives. But he'd also gambled with his father's life, and that weight was crushing. Dalice sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing, she said softly. I almost got him killed, Keller whispered. No, Malvin said, kneeling before his son despite protesting ribs. You saved us all. Sylven was going to kill us regardless. You took away his reason to do it immediately. That choice, that impossible choice, bought us the seconds we needed for help to arrive. Judge Vorik Variner burst through the courthouse doors, a tall man with iron-gray hair and Dalice's same determined eyes. He swept his daughter into an embrace, then turned to Malvin and Keller with profound gratitude. You saved her life, he said, voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to repay that debt. There's no debt, Malvin replied. We did what anyone should do. The judge studied him with the keen assessment of someone who'd spent decades evaluating character. Not anyone. Most people would have walked away. You chose differently, and my daughter is alive because of it. Over the next hours, statements were given, evidence was catalogued, and the full scope of Helix Dynamics conspiracy emerged. Sylvain Mariche had orchestrated not just one assassination attempt, but a coordinated strike against 12 witnesses. Only Dalice's survival and the evidence release had stopped it. News spread like wildfire. Major networks picked up the story. International media ran headlines, and within hours, Helix Dynamics stock had cratered. Executive arrests began. Political allies scrambled to distance themselves. The conspiracy was unraveling in spectacular fashion. As evening approached, Judge Veraner made an unexpected announcement. "There's someone who wants to meet you," he told Malvin. "Someone who's been following the situation closely and has a proposition." They were led to a private conference room where a distinguished woman in a business suit waited. She introduced herself as Fennell Crestwind, representing a coalition of federal agencies and private security firms. "Mr. Karaith," she began, "your actions over the past 24 hours have been remarkable. Your son's technical abilities are equally impressive. We'd like to offer you both positions, consulting work that would use your unique skills to prevent situations like this." Malvin glanced at Keller, then back to Fennell. "We're not looking for that kind of life, I understand. But consider this. You could help train others, prepare them to recognize threats and respond effectively. Make the world safer on your terms, your schedule." It was tempting, Malvin had to admit. But he'd left that world for a reason. "Let me think about it," he said finally. Dawn broke over Ashford Heights with startling clarity. The fog finally lifted. Malvin stood in his small apartment kitchen, making breakfast while Keller slept in the next room. The normalcy felt surreal after everything they'd endured. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, Dalice stood there, no longer in a torn dress, but wearing jeans and a simple sweater. Behind her on the street sat a sleek black car with tinted windows. "Good morning," she said with a smile. "May I come in?" "Over coffee," she explained. "My father and I have been talking. What you and Keller did, it goes beyond heroism. You risked everything for a stranger. That kind of integrity is rare." "We did what was right," Malvin said simply. "I know. And that's exactly why we want to help you." She pulled out a folder. "My father has connections, resources. We've established a foundation in your late wife's name, focused on supporting families who've lost parents to illness. Education grants, mentorship programs, the kind of support you needed when Elena passed." Malvin's throat tightened. "That's too much. It's not nearly enough," Dalice countered. "But it's a start. And there's something else." She gestured toward the window. "That car outside, it's not mine. It belongs to a coalition of prosecutors and federal agencies who want to personally thank you. They've arranged something." An hour later, Malvin and Keller stood on a private airfield as a jet touched down. When the door opened, families emerged, the 12 witnesses whose lives had been saved by their actions. Tearful reunions, heartfelt thanks, and the profound realization that their choices had rippled outward in ways they couldn't have imagined. Judge Veraner approached Malvin as the sun climbed higher. "The jet is yours for the day. Take Keller somewhere, anywhere you want. You've earned a moment of peace." But Malvin looked at Dalice, at the judge, at the family surrounding them, and realized something profound. Peace wasn't a destination. It was this moment, right here, knowing they'd stood against darkness and won. "Actually," Malvin said, "I'd like to stay. There's work to do, foundations to build, lives to protect. That's the real victory." Keller stood beside his father, no longer just a grieving boy, but a young man who'd found purpose. Dalice joined them, and in that moment, they understood what they'd become. Not heroes, not victims, but a family chosen and forged through trial, ready to make the world better, one brave choice at a time. The private jet gleamed in the morning sun. A symbol not of escape, but of possibility. And three people who'd started as strangers now stood together, bound by something stronger than blood. They had courage. They had each other. And that, in the end, was everything. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.